648-9144. Boktoberfest returns to Bok Tower Gardens. Enjoy the De Leon Family Band Friday and the Brussels Sprouts German Polka Band Saturday. Authentic Bavarian tunes and festival favorites for all ages. October 17th and 18th. Details at boktowergardens.org.
Where do you stand on the jab? Today on Florida Matters Live and Local, call in. We're talking about vaccinations. The Florida Surgeon General wants mandatory vaccinations eliminated, and some doctors are worried that long-conquered diseases could make a comeback as vaccination rates drop. One that people worry about is polio. I'm Matthew Petty. This is Florida Matters Live and Local. We'll be taking your calls on that topic and murder stories to be specific. Why are we drawn to true crime? My guest will be writer Gilbert King, who has a new murder tale to tell. And if you agree with Joyce Kilmer, who never saw a poem as lovely as a tree, well, how about a tree for free? Yep, you can get one in Tampa. We'll root around on that story and want to hear what you say in the next hour on Florida Matters Live and Local. Call 813-755-6562 or email floridamatters@wusf.org. First, the headlines.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Israel says it opened fire during an incident in northern Gaza, even as a ceasefire deal remains in place between Israel and Hamas. Here's NPR's Ruth Sherlock.
The Israeli military said its troops opened fire on, quote, several suspects. It said these individuals were crossing the yellow line that marks the boundary Israeli troops have pulled back to in the first phase of the US-brokered peace plan for Gaza. The military asked Gaza residents not to approach troops in this area and said those individuals were violating the ceasefire agreement. Hamas in a statement said it was Israel who violated the truce and that a number of Gaza residents were killed as a result. Gaza's local health authority said 6 Palestinians have been killed in 2 separate events in the Strip. Overall, though, for now, the ceasefire is broadly still holding. Ruth Sherlock, NPR News.
President Trump brokered the Israel-Hamas ceasefire, and in Washington, House Speaker Mike Johnson said he and his counterpart in Israel plan to rally global support to nominate Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize next year. Johnson also addressed reporters about the government shutdown now in its 14th day.
2 weeks of Democrats in Congress inflicting untold pain on the American people for nothing other than pure politics, as we've explained at this podium every day of the shutdown. Today, Senate Democrats will have their 8th chance to end this mess by passing our clean, nonpartisan continuing resolution.
Congressional Democrats are demanding the GOP restore soon-to-expire health care protections. They involve tax credits that have made health insurance more affordable for millions of people since the pandemic. Democrats also want to reverse Medicaid cuts. This morning, congressional Democrats and laid-off federal workers gathered outside the White House's budget office to condemn the dismissals of federal employees during the shutdown. Kansas state lawmakers visiting Washington tomorrow could face pressure to pass new congressional maps. Zane Irwin of the Kansas News Service reports the Trump administration has been urging Republican lawmakers across the U.S. to redraw their districts ahead of the 2026 elections.
Mid-decade redistricting is not the official reason for the visit, but Kansas lawmakers expect it will come up. A new Kansas map would likely hurt the state's only Democrat in Congress, Representative Sharice Davids. Republican Kansas Senator Doug Shane's district could get split up in the process, but Shane said he's going into the White House meeting with an open mind.
Gerrymandering, we've all been trained is an ugly word, but the country largely has been gerrymandered for a long, long time.
Kansas Republicans are trying to organize a special session in November to draw new maps. For NPR News, I'm Zane Irwin in Kansas City, Missouri.
From Washington, this is NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include BetterHelp, committed to supporting mental health through therapy and helping clients find balance. Clients are matched with one of 30,000 therapists for online therapy from anywhere at betterhelp.com/public.
You're listening to WUSF 89.7. I'm Craig Kopp. An environmental group says it's going to sue a recycling company for polluting a creek that flows into Sarasota Bay. WUSF's Steve Newborn reports that company has 60 days to comply.
Suncoast Waterkeeper has filed the intent to sue U.S. Recycling Company for discharges into Hog Creek and Sarasota Bay. It says the company, which recycles concrete by crushing it, is violating the Federal Clean Water Act. The group claims it found elevated levels of pollutants such as aluminum and iron exceeding federal guidelines for industrial facilities. These pollutants can harm fish and wildlife and degrade water quality. Justin Bloom is co-chair of the Waterkeeper chapter.
We've seen water flow off of the site into the drainage area along Industrial Court, and that stormwater detention is collecting the runoff from U.S. Recycling, which is, we've measured very high in pollutants.
Bloom says they're trying to get the company to fix the runoff before filing suit in federal court. Steve Newborn, WUSF 89.7 News.
Hillsborough County now has cameras monitoring speeding in school zones. Since the program started 3 weeks ago, deputies have issued more than 8,700 citations. Kara Baxter is a master sergeant with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. Speaking Monday on Florida Matters Live and Local, she said the speed enforcement is not limited to just the times when those beacons are flashing.
We are encouraging children to go eat breakfast at school, have that good first meal of the day, but we're not protecting them. So therefore, we enforce those speeds during that earlier time from earlier in the day so we can protect those kids.
Baxter said drivers may be cited if they're caught going 10 miles over the posted speed limit. The county installed these cameras last year after a new law made speed cameras legal in the state of Florida. You can hear more of that conversation at WUSF.org. I'm Craig Kopp, WUSF 89.7 News.
Want to catch up on Tampa Bay area news and culture? I'm Sky LeBron, and I got you every weekday morning with the Bay Blend podcast from WUSF. It's quick, fun, and you'll discover something new every day. It's the Bay Blend, wherever you get your podcasts or at WUSF.org.
Get ready to light up Raymond James Stadium as the Bulls take on Florida Atlantic University for a homecoming showdown. October 18th at 7:30 p.m. Visit usfbullstix.com or call 800-GO-BULLS for tickets.
You're listening to Florida Matters Live and Local, broadcasting from the Doctors Lorraine Rubis and Neil Frankel studio in Tampa. I'm Matthew Petty. Do you know anyone with polio? If you do, it might be somebody who had polio when they were a kid a long time ago.
It was very crippling from my left hip down to my left foot. My leg was twisted like a pretzel, and my left foot was, according to x-rays that I actually saw, was on backwards.
Well, that's Kenneth Fuller. He'll be 70 this year. He's a polio survivor. He's one of about 300,000 polio survivors in the United States today. Polio was eradicated here in this country thanks to vaccination programs, but vaccination rates for all sorts of diseases are starting to slip. There's skepticism about their safety and misinformation too. In Sarasota, for example, 2 in 10 kids are not vaccinated for the 16 required vaccines for attending schools in Florida, and the DeSantis administration is moving to remove some of those required vaccines. Doctors are worried they'll start seeing diseases that they don't have the skills to treat. We're talking today with WSF's Megan Bowman and Dr. Michael Teng, an infectious diseases specialist from the University of South Florida. Are you worried about diseases like polio making a comeback? Are those fears overblown? And if so, how would you prevent yourself from getting an infectious disease? I'd like to hear your thoughts. You can call 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. Send us an email too. We're at FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Well, here's Dr. Jennifer Caputo-Seidler, a local hospital physician.
Today, the people who are training to be pediatricians, they're not taught how to recognize a case of acute polio when it comes in. And the doctors practicing today have never managed it.
So, Megan, say a little more about what doctors are worried about as vaccination rates decline.
Right. So if vaccination rates go down, the spread of infectious diseases could spread more easily. Dr. Caputo-Seidler, heard about Latipo's announcement on September 3rd. And then she started seeing these doctors on these forums and these groups kind of asking each other, hey, do you know how to treat polio? And even she says she herself wasn't taught when she was in medical school. It was, just part of the childhood vaccine schedule.
The state announced plans to drop school vaccine mandates for diseases like chickenpox, hib influenza, hepatitis V, and some pneumococcal diseases too, like meningitis, I think. What about polio and measles, though?
Right. So for those that you just listed, I think they're looking at December for those mandates to lift. But for measles and polio, that would take legislative action. So it is something, we're coming up on our new legislative session in January. So it's definitely something we're following up to see if there are any bills proposed to do away with those.
Yeah. Well, let's go to the phones. We've got Andrew calling in. Andrew, you're on the air. What are you thinking?
Well, I'm a pediatrician, and I've been a pediatrician for more than 50 years. And I am very afraid of what's going to happen if they eliminate the mandate for pneumococcal disease that you just mentioned and Haemophilus influenzae. When I was a young pediatrician first coming into Newport Richey, had a phone call about a child who was having trouble breathing. So I met the mother in the emergency room. The child was obviously in distress, about 3 years old, leaning forward, drooling, and I realized right away, since I had just come off training, that this was an example of something called epiglottitis, which is
Andrew, you still with us? All right, sounds like we might have lost that call, but it sounds like from what I could glean there, Andrew, pediatrician for a long time, has got some concerns about the dropping of those vaccine mandates, and he was talking about pneumococcal disease. Dr. Ting, I wonder what you're thinking as you're kind of reflecting on some of what's happening at the state level and then thinking about what that means for infectious diseases. What's going through your mind right now?
Well, there are a lot of vaccines that are not mandated by legislation, as Megan has pointed out. The ones that we know that we've had 50, 60 years of experience, those are legislated: polio, measles, mumps. But that doesn't mean the newer ones like pneumococcal vaccines are any less effective against the disease. And so pneumococcal disease, these are newer vaccines because we have moved on from the really significant infectious diseases that caused huge numbers of sickness and deaths to these other vaccines that are targeting infectious diseases that still cause significant problems, like Haemophilus influenzae, pneumococcals, and for our students here at USF, the meningococcal vaccines.
Yeah. Okay. The number, if you want to weigh in on this conversation, we're talking about vaccine mandates and whether lifting those mandates for some, if not all diseases, as some folks are calling for, is going to create some issues down the track. Give us a call. We're at 813-755-6562. Are you worried about diseases making a comeback if they've been previously conquered, like polio? Do you think some of these fears are overblown? 813-755-6562. You can also send us an email. We're at FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Well, Megan, let's just go back to the polio survivor you talked to for your reporting, Kenneth Fuller. Let's just hear a little bit of what he had to say.
If they roll back this vaccine, it's going to be devastating for not only America, but I think for other countries. I mean, I understand Darwinism. I understand the survival of the fittest, but damn it, we can do something about this.
All right, so he's clearly pretty fired up about this, Kenneth Fuller. What's his life like now? Because he's a polio survivor, right?
Yeah, so he actually contracted it at 6 months old. He went through 7 orthopedic surgeries. So after about the age of 12, through his early adulthood, he didn't really use a lot of mobility aids. Then around 1990, and he was also a minister, around 1990, he's standing at the pulpit, his legs give out, and he's diagnosed with what's called post-polio syndrome, and it's a kind of an after effect, right? And it can affect about half of folks who have polio as kids. So now, he's almost 70. He mostly uses a scooter to get around. He says if he goes out for 2 hours, he's in bed for the next 24. But he is still advocating for the inactive polio vaccine, or IPV, and that's what the U.S. has used since 2000. And you can also see photos of him. You can hear even a song that he wrote about life with polio on WUSF.org.
Okay, yeah, some more reporting there if you want to check it out. If you know anyone who had polio as a kid, or maybe you're a polio survivor, maybe you've got some concerns about polio or other diseases reemerging, the number is 813-755-6562. Eileen is on the line. Eileen, you're on the air. Go for it.
Yes, hi. Thank you for taking my call. I just want to clarify before I say anything that I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I am a safe vaccine proponent. And the majority of the vaccines that are on the children's schedules have not been properly studied. They have not had what they call double-blind studies. And then once a vaccine has been approved, if they have a new version of it, even though the original version hasn't been studied, they just go ahead and approve it. And I just watched last night a documentary called An Inconvenient Study that is produced by Del Bigtree, and it was horrifying, the facts and the details that are in there. And again, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I just want the vaccines for our children to be safe. And I am one in our family. We absolutely believe that one of our nephews has been damaged by the vaccines when he was a child, where he, right after having his vaccine at about 18 months old, everything changed with him. They had a study, one of the cases that they had was a family that had triplets. And all three of their children, within 2 to 4 hours of having had, I forget which vaccine it was, but they were like 18 months old, I believe. Within 2 to 4 hours of each of those children, they all had major issues where two of them went completely nonverbal. They lost their hearing. It was significant. So there's a lot of information out there. I just want to encourage parents and our government. All they have to do is do the studies. They have the information to think about this. Think about all of the major hospitals that have got the information for the kids who have been vaccinated versus the kids who have been not. They can do the study.
Yeah,
they already have a study.
Eileen, thank you so much for weighing in. I really appreciate your call. Let me put that to you, Dr. Ting. I mean, first of all, the notion that vaccines that have been given to kids are not studied effectively, what do you make of that?
Well, so I'm not familiar with the studies from the 1950s and 60s when the polio vaccines and the measles virus vaccines came out. I will say that those vaccines have been used for 60-something years, and hundreds of millions, if not billions of doses have been given out. So if nothing else, this is a study that has been done in the real world in terms of what kinds of studies we talk about. We've talked about clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. This would be considered phase 4 post-marketing clinical studies. And there are monitoring systems for all of these potential problems with the vaccines. There's a vaccine reporting system from the CDCs. These vaccines that are in the legislation, polio, measles, mumps, rubella, they've been proven to be safe and effective over the course of decades now.
Do stay with us. We are talking with Dr. Michael Ting, infectious disease specialist with the University of South Florida, and WSF's Megan Bowman with the Your Florida Project, talking about the potential that with vaccination rates dropping, diseases that were previously conquered could make a reappearance. I want to hear your thoughts as well. 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. What are your thoughts on vaccination rates and whether these vaccines are safe or not? Give us a call. The conversation continues in just a moment on Florida Matters Live and Local.
The The Cars were huge. They won the first MTV Best Video Award with frontmen Rick Ocasek and Ben Orr. But a new book dives deep into the whole band next time, Here and Now.
Coming up at 1 after Florida Matters Live and Local.
Listener support powers WUSF. Funding also comes from Brandon Business Machines. Brandon Business Machines is a locally owned and operated office equipment dealer and IT support company. They've been serving the Tampa Bay area for 44 years with copier and computer sales and service. Online at bbmusa.com. Support for WUSF and its hurricane coverage comes from EnduraFlood, made to protect Florida homes from drywall damage caused by flooding from hurricanes. Components are designed to be waterproof, and the EnduraFlood wall system can be opened and removed to dry out. Details are at enduraflood.com.
Here with Florida Matters Live and Local, I'm Matthew Petty. We're talking about vaccination rates as vaccination rates for all sorts of diseases start to slip. There's skepticism about their safety, there's misinformation floating around. Doctors are worried they're going to start seeing diseases that they don't have the skills to treat anymore. One of those diseases is polio. WUSF's Megan Bowman has been doing some reporting on concerns about polio making a reappearance. But there are other diseases too, like measles, which we've been seeing outbreaks of around the country. We're with Megan, and also Dr. Michael Teng is with us. He's an infectious disease specialist from the University of South Florida. I want to hear from you as well. Are you worried about diseases like polio or others making a comeback? Are these fears overblown? What are your thoughts on infectious diseases and how best to prevent yourself from getting those or your loved ones as well? Give us a call, 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. Let's go to the phones. I believe we have Chad on the line. Chad, are you there?
I'm here, Matthew.
Yeah, go for it.
Good morning, or good afternoon.
Yeah, it is afternoon, yes. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I just want to say I just got my MMR and polio booster vaccines because I had a titer taken and it was inconclusive. And I got my hepatitis, COVID, flu shot. I'm not seeing all these vaccine injuries that people are talking about. Like, where are these people? I mean, I know thousands of people that have been vaccinated, and I don't know any of adverse effects. So I say get the vaccine.
Chad, thank you so much for your call. I really appreciate that. Let me just go to an email here from Francis in Tarpon Springs, who writes, my father contracted polio in the early 1950s and also suffered greatly from what became known as post-polio syndrome during the last 30 years of his life. I wouldn't wish this disease on anyone. It is absolutely astonishing that we could potentially be looking at a resurgence of this dreadful disease because of vaccine misinformation and outright lies about their effectiveness and safety. Also, curbing vaccine mandates for our school children in the state of Florida is reckless, if not criminal. Thanks for that email, Francis. You can also send us your thoughts. We're at FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Let's go back to the phones now, if we could. I believe we've got Michelle calling in. Michelle, you're on the air.
Yes. So the reason for my call is I echo a lot of the thoughts of the lady that called earlier and talked about the triplets. When my children were growing up, my understanding and from the research I did that a lot of the children's vaccines were preserved with mercury, which really frightened me. And because of that, I chose not to vaccinate my children. And then through the years, I've heard about children who became affected in an adverse way by getting vaccines. And again, I'm actually not anti-vaccine. I really think that there are some cases like with polio and smallpox and measles that it's important to get vaccinations if they're safe. When my youngest child was born, and this is after having other children that I did not have vaccinated, as an infant, they nurse, because she was born in a hospital and not a home birth or a child, at a birthing center. They brought in a whole tray. She wasn't even 1 week old. They brought in a whole tray that was lined with needles. And I think that compared to when, I was a child, the number of vaccines that they're giving children today, I don't think that it warrants that many vaccinations. But there are situations like with polio, I don't want to see those, see the bad adverse effects from the disease.
Michelle, thank you so much for your call. So what I'm hearing is you're saying that some vaccinations are good, others you're not so you are a little concerned about. Michelle, thanks for your call. I want to just put that to you, if I could, Dr. Ting. I mean, the notion of mercury in vaccines, that's something that I've heard as well. I mean, can you clarify what's going on with that? Is that something that people should be worried about now?
Thimerosal was used as a preservative in vaccines previously. That has now been taken out of all vaccines. So right now we don't have thimerosal as a preservative. I'm a father too, and that first day of life when you have a hospital birth and you see your child getting vaccinated on day one, it is a little bit of a shock. I won't lie that I was, as somebody who's worked on vaccines for decades, it's still sort of shocking. But there's really good reasons for that. For example, the hepatitis B vaccine that they give your child as soon as they're born, that's because you really want to block transmission of hepatitis B, because hepatitis B is a chronic disease. And if you get it as a baby, you will have it for the rest of your life. And that can lead to cirrhosis or hepatocellular carcinoma and cause major problems down the line. And that's the most vulnerable time. So a lot of these vaccines, I think the key here is that we are doing these vaccinations to try to protect our most vulnerable population, and that's little kids.
Yeah. Let's go back to the phones if we could. Joe, you're on the air. What's your thought?
Yeah, hi. I just want to say, people tend to get together and form governments and give them authority. It's normal. It happens all the time. And we give authority for, who can drive, right? You got to have a driver's license to get scuba tanks filled. And I think it's to go to on campus at an elementary school, you have to get, background check. And we willfully do this to be a part of a civilization. And I think that, having vaccines is smart and it's scientific and it's even common sense at this point. I don't think we should go backwards and revert the ones that have been proven. And I think we should go forward and properly vet the ones that are new.
Yep. Joe, thank you so much for your call. Really appreciate that. I want to get one more in, getting close to time here. But Deborah, you're on the air. Go for it. Deborah, you with us?
Hello. Thank you so much for putting me on.
Sure.
My only concern, with things is, as much as vaccines are forced and pushed and made such a normal thing, like every caller stated, having children, you see lines of vaccines lined up. It's like, give us the facts, give us the studies, give us all the information that we know you guys have at hand. The CDCs and, all these government established things are supposed to be in place for the people, for our health, for our young. Show us the facts, show us the 5-year studies, the 10-year studies to, make us more comfortable. Just don't tell us to go with the masses.
Right. Deborah, thank you so much. I'm going to just throw that to, I appreciate your call, Deborah. I'm going to throw that to Dr. Ting if I could. I mean, what I'm hearing from a lot of these callers is we need more information. There's information out there though, right?
There is information. I think all of the, for studies and even like I was talking about, post-marketing surveillance, all of those studies are available on the CDC website. They do studies consistently with, it's called, MMR, MMWR. There's a report that the CDC comes out with that studies all the different vaccinations and all the, they do surveillance on how many people are getting vaccinated, what kinds of diseases they're seeing out there, the safety of the vaccines. So all the information is out there. It's not necessarily easily digestible because these are really scientific reports that they're putting out. So I think the issue is, I've heard this too, because people want to see the reports, but they don't necessarily have the background to actually digest that in a comprehensive fashion.
Right. So the intermediary's got to be like the doctor, your physician, your pediatrician, whoever it may be, who can interpret it and sort of give you the facts there. We're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much, everyone who called in and sent us their thoughts. We appreciate that. The conversation will continue, but we do need to move on for now. Michael Ting is an infectious disease specialist from the University of South Florida. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And WSF's Megan Bowman, with Your Florida Project. You can find her reporting on WSF.org. Megan, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Conversation with Gilbert King is coming up in just a moment. Stay tuned for that on Florida Matters, live and local.
On the next Fresh Air, we remember Diane Keaton and listen back to her 1997 interview. She talked about Annie Hall, The Godfather, singing, how she got her start in the production of Hair, and why she was one of the few performers in the cast who was not naked on stage. Keaton died Saturday at age 79. Join us.
Fresh Air can now be heard weeknights, Monday through Thursday at 7 o'clock.
Hi, it's Steve Inskeep with an easy way to support this station. Donate a car that you don't need anymore. It's free to you and could be worth hundreds of dollars.
Coming to Ruth Eckerd Hall in Clearwater. Spend Valentine's Day with an unforgettable night of music and rhythm. Saturday, February 14th. Tickets are on sale now. Visit rutheckerdhall.com for tickets and information.
Welcome back to Florida Matters, live and local. I'm Matthew Petty. Bone Valley, a true story of injustice and redemption in the heart of Florida, tells the story of a Polk County man, Leo Schofield. He was locked up for more than 35 years for a murder he didn't commit. Now, the book began as a podcast, and here's Schofield in a phone call from prison during season 1 of that podcast.
Exciting for me. I can't even explain how encouraging it is to have people believe in me after all these years and to know the truth finally.
That's Leo Schofield there. He was released on parole in 2023 after another man confessed to killing Schofield's wife, Michelle. Well, Gilbert King produced the podcast with Kelsey Decker. King won a Pulitzer Prize for his 2013 book Devil in the Grove, Thurgood Marshall, The Groveland Boys, and The Dream of a New America. It's a deep dive into the case of 4 black Americans wrongly accused of rape in the 1940s in the Lake County town of Groveland. He returned to Lake County with Beneath a Ruthless Sun, a true story of race, violence, and justice lost and found, about another case involving race and wrongful conviction. King grew up in New York, where he lives now. So what is it about Florida crime stories that draws Gilbert King to the Sunshine State? He's with us now, and if you've got a question for Gilbert King, give us a call. Is there a murder story that you think should be a book? Call 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. You can also email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Gilbert, thank you so much for coming in. Really appreciate it.
Oh, it's great to be back here, Matthew. Thanks for having me.
So, Leo Schofield, tell us about him. Who is he? Why did you decide to focus on this story?
Yeah, I actually didn't. It came to me. I was out speaking about my book, Devil in the Grove. I was at a judicial conference, and afterwards I was signing books, and this judge came up to me and handed me his business card, and it just said on the back of it, said Leo Schofield, had his prison number, and it said, not just wrongfully convicted, he's an innocent man. And I remember thinking, like, judges aren't supposed to do that. You know, they're supposed to be for the integrity. There's certain ethical canons that they have to follow. They're not allowed to really talk about injustices within the state. And I kind of showed that card around, and people were kind of aghast that a judge had wrote that. And so I followed up with him and started talking to him, and he told me, you really need to look into this case. There's an innocent man who's still in prison. I can tell you exactly how they put him there. And that just got my curiosity.
I was reading too that he, or maybe I heard it in the podcast, he kind of just happened to wander into that seminar you were holding, right? He wasn't even supposed to be there.
No, he saw my name, and I think he was thinking I was Gilbert Gottfried, and he was like, "What is a comedian doing here?" You know, for a law conference. Right. But then he got trapped in the front seat and couldn't leave, and then he listened to it and he said, "Well, I got to get this guy for Leo's case."
Mm-hmm. There's a moment in season 2 of the podcast where the man who confessed to the murder, this is Jeremy Scott, calls you from prison, and you just happened to be with Schofield at the time. 2 men agree to talk to each other, which seems like a stunning turn of events. And I want to ask you about that. But first, let's just listen to some of what Schofield had to say to Jeremy Scott.
Jeremy, I want to tell you something. And this is coming from a long time of prayer and, you know, just a lot of thought. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to thank you for telling the truth. I want you to know that I forgive you with all my heart.
What was it like to be a fly on the wall for that conversation?
I mean, it was absolutely surreal. You know, Jeremy had been calling me for the last couple of years, and, you know, sometimes he'd get locked down in solitary. I never knew when he was going to call. And Leo had just gotten into a very serious motorcycle accident and was kind of laid up in bed, couldn't bear any weight. And so I went to visit him in February, and as I was there, Jeremy called. And it was kind of this awkward moment. Do I take this call? Leo said, go ahead and take it. And I just asked Jeremy if, he was okay with it. But Leo was here. Do you want to say a few words to him? And I'll just tell you, Jeremy had told me over the years that, he said, one day I just hope to sit down at a table with Leo and tell him I'm sorry for what I did, not only for killing his wife, but for ruining his life. Leo spent 36 years in prison for this crime, always maintained his innocence. And here he was with a moment to talk to Jeremy, the man who's forensically tied to the crime scene and who confessed. And, it's just Leo being Leo, to be honest with you. He's an extraordinarily graceful, gracious person, very spiritual. And, Jeremy was just showing so much remorse along the way. I think he felt like at one point he said to me, I go to bed at night and I see the faces of the dead bodies that I killed. I believe he's killed at least 4 people. And it was weighing on him, and especially this one, because he knew that another man was paying for the crime.
We're talking with Gilbert King about his latest book. It's called Bone Valley. It's about the story of a man who was locked up in prison for more than 35 years for a crime he didn't commit. He was accused, found guilty of killing his wife, Michelle. Another man later confessed to the killing, and Leo is now out and seeking exoneration. You can give us a call if you want to have a bit of a chat with Gilbert. Maybe you've got an idea for the next book he should be working on or his podcast. 813-755-6562 is the number, 813-755-6562. You can also send us an email, FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Now, there is a bit of a plot twist, right? Because I was reading that just a week or two back, Jeremy Scott died in prison. He wasn't that old. He was in his mid-50s, I think, of heart failure. What does that mean for Leo Schofield's bid for exoneration?
Well, I talked to some lawyers about this, and it actually doesn't really have much of an effect. I mean, there's a law that says, confessors, if they've passed on, you can go back to tape-recorded statements or affidavits or any kind of testimony they've given. So I don't think it'll really have that much of an effect. But it was kind of a profound moment, sort of came out of the blue. Just 2 weeks ago, we learned that, Jeremy Scott had passed away. And it was interesting to see Leo's response to that. He one of the things he'd always said was like, I had to learn to forgive him because this bitterness and anger was going to destroy me. And it was destroying him in prison. And, he's a very spiritual guy, and he had to really just pray and realize the only way for him to survive was to just let go of this hatred and bitterness at the man who's not only killed his wife, but caused him to be in prison for so long. And he was able to do it. And since then, he's shown a lot of empathy for Jeremy. It's probably the only person in the whole story who has real empathy for Jeremy is Leo, which I think is pretty extraordinary. And, he took the news of Jeremy's passing pretty hard, but only as a human being, I think. He says, I don't have the ability to forgive for Michelle, his wife's family, or others, but I had to do it to save my own life.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it sort of gives a lot more weight to that conversation that you were witness to between those two men, because it sounds like it was really important for them to have that conversation, at least for Leo to say, I forgive you, and for Jeremy as well to kind of hear that from him.
Yeah, it really meant a lot to both people. I mean, even Leo said, afterwards, like, I, always wanted to forgive him, but like today was the test when he called and I had to do it. Matthew, what's really strange is that, after the news of Jeremy's death, kind of oddly enough, Jeremy's family is sort of reconnected with Jeremy over the last few months. And, they were very moved by the story too. And they actually asked Leo if he would deliver the eulogy for Jeremy Scott.
Oh, wow.
Which we did last week. And, just to see this happen, being in this, private memorial service where it's just, family members and me and Leo, and just to hear Leo's words, he gave a great gift to that family, and acknowledged that, without Jeremy's confession, he don't think he'd ever be out of prison.
I got to ask too, though, about, the other family in the mix here, Michelle's family. What do they say about all this?
Well, it's interesting enough. Michelle's brother, Jesse, was really 14 at the time. He didn't really know too much about it, but over the years he started doing his own investigation and started looking into it, and he ended up supporting the parole for Leo and actually writing a letter to the parole commission saying he didn't have confidence in the conviction of Leo Schofield. So he's really come around, And, it's really just interesting to see all these people from Leo's past sort of reconnect with him in this way. And he's getting a great deal of support from Leo, from Michelle's brother.
Mm-hmm. But there are others in the family who aren't happy with the turn of events.
There's another brother who's out on the West Coast, and he actually testified against Leo's parole at the time. So, yeah, they're a little bit split on that. But,
Bone Valley is a great name for a book. Why that title?
Well, I'd never heard of it. And I spend a lot of time in Central Florida, and I talk to people in that area who they say they've never heard of it. But basically it goes back to the Peace River, and when they were over 100 years ago, they were dredging it, looking for ways to make a canal across the state. Mm-hmm. And by just digging in a little bit, they started finding all these shark teeth and skulls and just so many megalodons and odd creatures from 1 million years ago when Florida was underwater. And so because they found so much of this, they began to call it Bone Valley. It's mostly known for what am I thinking of? The mineral in there. Potassium? No, it's not. What am I thinking of? I'm
not
blanking
sure.
out on it. But it's a fertilizer center. Okay. And it basically, I think 3/4 of the world's fertilizer was coming from Polk County at the time. And the phosphate mines, that's the word I was listening for. But yes, but right in those phosphate mines, in the sand, they were finding all these mammals. So it became known as like Bone Valley.
Mm-hmm. This is your third book set in Florida. What is it about Florida that keeps you coming back here?
It's a really interesting. Mainly, I go out and do talks, and I'm being like proximate in the area, and people always tip me off to these stories, and they're really good stories, and they're stories I'd never heard before. So I don't know. I think of this just area of Central Florida as just being so rich in these kind of stories that are really not well known to the public. And in particular, this case was not really well known. I think a lot of it had to do with local media coverage. Didn't really make it seem that interesting. It seemed kind of an open and shut case. But when you dig into it and look into it, you start seeing all sorts of signs of prosecutorial misconduct and all sorts of different things that make it interesting for me as a writer to really delve into it. So I don't ever want to leave Florida. I feel like there's just so many people here that help me, and the sunshine laws make it really accessible to me. So I really don't want to leave Florida for any of my stories.
You've got a bit of experience in your past in Florida too, though. I mean, you went to USF.
I did attend USF back in the early 80s, and I'm proud of this school. They elected me to the Alumni Hall of Fame a couple of years ago, which was really exciting.
What were you studying?
I was studying English, and I wanted to get into English and be a writer, but I moved to New York and got put into a photography department. And for the next 20 years, I was working as a photographer, and finally decided, I want to get back to my real true love, which was writing.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you've written a lot about kind of injustices and the justice system in general, both in Florida and just kind of generally. What did you learn from telling this story?
Well, a lot of the cases are different. I think when I look back at the Lake County stuff, most of the point, it was law enforcement that was the problem. You had a really powerful sheriff who was, convinced that he was going to railroad these innocent men. In this particular case, in Leo's case, it's more of the prosecutor's office in this case. I thought the police handled this entire case pretty ethically. I think there's a few areas of incompetence, but you could probably find that all the time. But I thought the Polk County Sheriff's Office did a really good job with it. And I think there was a reason that they charged nobody with this murder for 15 months. I don't think they really had a case. It was only until this one prosecutor, John Aguero, entered the case. And he was sort of known as the king of like circumstantial cases and putting things together. And I think you get to see a lot of manipulation that he was doing with the witnesses in order to build his narrative.
Mm-hmm. I know you've been touring around talking about this book. Have you had other folks come up to you and say, I got a story for you?
Yeah. I mean, some of them I've heard before. Like there's stories like that, you should look into this case. I used to get that a lot from the Dozier boys in the White House. Sure. I used to get a lot. And I said, that one might be even too dark for me. So that was a really tough one. But yeah, I do get a lot of tips about certain cases to look into them. And a lot of times from lawyers and judges who really know these cases. And so I really value those leads.
Yeah. I mean, Judge Scott Cupp, this is the person who kind of set you off on this path.
Yeah.
Have you maintained contact with him? You kind of keep in touch?
Oh, absolutely. He comes out with me on certain book talks, and he'll sometimes talk about the law, and we'll have conversations together. He's a really admirable man. Became a friend of mine. He not only tipped me off to this case, but once the podcast came out, he was so moved by it and just said, you know what, I'm just going to resign from the bench. I want to go back to being Leo Schofield's lawyer and represented him for parole, which, the New York Times did a feature story about this. It was a really national news story. This man who gives up his seat on the bench to go represent a convicted murderer in Florida. And he did that and was very successful. And Leo was able to get parole finally.
In the last few seconds here, you got another podcast up your sleeve, or is it back to writing?
Looking at a few ideas. I really love podcasting a lot, and the storytelling is just so different from writing. So I'm really enjoying both. So, but no ideas yet.
Gilbert King's new book is Bone Valley, a true story of injustice and redemption in the heart of Florida. It's about a Polk County man, Leo Schofield, who spent 35 years in prison for a murder he didn't commit. You can find the Bone Valley podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Well, coming up next, we're going to take a look at sports in the Tampa Bay region. Do stay tuned for that. That's when Florida Matters Live and Local continues.
I'm Robin Young. The band The Cars was huge. They won the first MTV Best Video Award. Rick Ocasek wrote many songs. Ben Orr sang many, but a new book dives deep into the whole band.
It was 5 people. It wasn't just Rick. It wasn't just Ben. It was these great 5 members that really made the sound of The Cars.
Next time, Here and Now.
Coming up at 1 after Florida Matters Live and Local.
You want critical information this hurricane season, and WUSF is here to help. It all starts with our comprehensive guide at WUSF.org. It answers common hurricane-related questions, like preparing a go kit or safety plan. As storms approach, we'll be on air and online with live local updates and information from the Florida Public Radio Emergency Network. Before, during, and after storms, WUSF is here for you, ready to serve.
WUSF presents An Evening with David Sedaris, live at the Strass Center, featuring all news stories, audience Q&A, and book signing, October 30th. Tickets and information at davidsedarisontour.com. Support for the Zest podcast comes from WUSF members and Adelaide Interiors, with a new location now open on Kennedy Boulevard east of Habana Avenue in Tampa, offering lunch and learn events and featuring the Wellness Kitchen, where design meets well-being. Learn more and see the schedule at adelaide.com.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Matthew Petty. It's time for football in Tampa. The excitement is building in the Tampa Bay area as the Buccaneers are tied for the best record in the NFL at 5-1, while the University of South Florida Bulls are up to number 19 in the Associated Press poll. Joining us to talk more about sports is WSF's Mark Schreiner and Sky LeBron, who's the host of The Bay Blend. Thank you both for stopping by.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
You can weigh in too. Call 813-755-6562 if you've got some thoughts on the Bucs or the Bulls. Let's just send an email to FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Mark, I want to start with you. Bucs finally had a game that didn't come down to the final plays Sunday. They beat San Francisco 30-19. How have they been putting these wins together?
Well, as you said, Matt, the idea that this past weekend was not dramatic, not coming down to the final minute or final minutes of the game was something a little bit different. The first 5 weeks were all, nail biters with the Bucs pulling it out, and really the man who's been doing most of it has been the quarterback Baker Mayfield, who, really is seeing while he's had a number of good years here with the Bucs, he's almost having like a career resurgence with the team, and he's starting to get named as an MVP candidate on many ballots. So it's been interesting to see the team really, falling behind at some places, but coming back and really pulling it out at the end, and Mayfield being one of those main reasons.
I know next to nothing about football, so indulge me if you could for a moment, but can you win, or can you be a winning team without a good quarterback?
I would say, yeah.
It's possible. Yeah. It's just you have to have such a well-constructed team around that mediocre to lower-tier quarterback. And I think we're seeing the exact opposite with the Bucs right now.
Yeah.
And it's not that the Bucs are poorly constructed. They're a very well-constructed team. They're just incredibly injured, kind of similar to last year. I mean, we've been seeing one of the best rookie wide receiver seasons that we've seen from a Bucs wide receiver in quite some time in Emeka Egbuka. He's been incredible, and guess what? He just got injured. But the thing that Baker has been able to do is consistently just find that next guy that he could use. Tez Johnson, I don't think too many people especially nationally, were talking about this guy, and now he's become one of the top targets for Baker Mayfield. He just has figured out ways with whatever is in front of him to get a first down, get a touchdown. He'll use his tight ends. He'll run if he has to. He'll scramble. And Baker Mayfield is not one of the bigger quarterbacks in the NFL, but he's just tough, and he has those plays that are electrifying, that amp up the rest of the team, that make everybody around him want to play hard for him.
Yeah, and when you start winning like that, you get the swagger, and really Baker's got that swagger right now, and it's starting to pick up a lot of national attention as well.
The number is 813-755-6562 if you want to get in on this conversation, talking about the Bucs, football in general. Just tell me a little more about Baker. I mean, where did he come from? Who is he?
Well, you were mentioning this earlier, Sky. It's as I said, kind of a reclamation project. This is his third team.
Yeah, well, it's actually his fourth. Started on the Browns, goes to the Panthers, which I'm just going to straight up say it. It's some of the worst organizations you could go to start your NFL career.
Why?
I mean, they've just historically had bad quarterback play, not much success, poor rosters, a lot of coaching turnover. Yeah. Struggles in both of those stops. I mean, actually, and Cleveland did a good job and brought them out, ends up getting traded, brought them to the playoffs, won a playoff game, still gets traded, goes to the Panthers, struggles there, gets cut in the middle of the season, finishes off the season with the LA Rams, and kind of resurges a little bit in a backup role, is kind of thrust into that lineup, and then signs with the Bucs right after Tom Brady retires. Yeah. And there's been no drop-off. You know, I think a lot of people are expecting a drop-off of some sort to take place, and it just has not happened. They've won the division every year that he's been at the helm. And I was just saying to Mark, a couple weeks ago, he was playing another quarterback that's gone through the same kind of ordeal in Sam Darnold, who went to the Jets. Then he went to the 49ers, kind of struggled in both of those stops. Then went to Minnesota and revitalized his career. And they played last week in arguably the game of the year. It's going to be hard to beat that out, but it's just kind of cool to see these guys' stories as they develop throughout their career. Sometimes you don't figure it out for the first couple years, but once you find that good system around you, good things can happen.
You're with Florida Matters Live and Local. We're talking with Sky LeBron with WUSF and also WUSF's Mark Schreiner about football, talking about the Bucs. I do want to get to a little bit of the Bulls in a moment, but let's just stay with the Bucs if we could for now. I mean, from what I understand, if you're a good quarterback, if you're kind of you're lucky with injuries, you can stay in the game for quite some time, right? Because this is a very punishing and bruising game.
Absolutely. And Baker's, 30? Is he 30-something yet?
I don't know if he's even 30 at this point. The one thing I did want to bring up, too, is it's so easy to talk about the offense because they're so exciting. But the defense has come up in some pretty clutch situations as well. I think back to that Houston game, really played well. And then most recently against the 49ers this past weekend, they got a couple interceptions. They got 6 sacks. I mean, they were able to pressure the quarterback and create that situation where the Bucs didn't have to drive down the field at the last second and win the game. So as much as it's been great to talk about the offense, you have to kind of tip your cap to what the defense has been able to do in a tough situation. Like I said, the Bucs have had a ton of injuries on both sides of the ball.
6 sacks, is that a lot for a game of football?
That's a lot of sacks. I mean, as the opposing quarterback, you get sacked a few times, it starts to get in your head. You're going to start to think, oh, man, how much time do I have going forward?
And make mistakes. We're going to see probably within the next 4 weeks or so the Bucs huge game next Monday night at Detroit. Lions coming off of a tough loss this past weekend. Then the Bucs are in New Orleans, which New Orleans normally plays them tough in New Orleans, but that should be a win. Bad. Then they've got a bye week to get healthy, so that's important. And then the 2 big back-to-back games with AFC East competition. New England, who is shockingly one of the best teams in the NFL right now, and Buffalo, who is arguably right there with the Bucs as the best team in the NFL.
So we're going to learn a lot about this team over the next month and a half, and can that magic continue?
You talked about injuries, or actually I think both of you talked about injuries, but what have the Bucs been facing injury-wise this season?
A lot of wide receivers and
offensive linemen as well has been the big one, and that is why Baker's needed to scramble and improvise and be the magician that he's been is because the guys in front of him, who are some of the best players in the NFL. I mean, you're looking at a guy like Tristan Wirfs, one of the best offensive linemen, didn't start the year. Yeah. He was injured, and Baker still figured out a way, the team figured out a way to navigate around that. Those are huge injuries,
and
literally.
And also the wide receivers, when you're talking Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, your 1 and 2 wide receivers are out. Next man up is always the rule in the NFL, next man up. And Ibuka doing so well as a rookie, but then he gets injured. So, again, it comes down to someone like Tez Johnson where it's, the next guy has got to do the job, and the Bucs are seeing it.
Yeah, I know people listening to this, if you're anywhere near the campus of USF, you may be thinking about Bulls as well. So, USF football, Sky, what can you tell us about how they're doing?
They have been so good. I always like to say, I talked to Byron Brown, the starting quarterback at Wingstop, like a year ago, so I like to say that was like the trajectory up for his career.
After meeting Sky,
off
he went.
But he's just been awesome for the Bulls. He had an amazing sophomore year, really struggled last year, and then has
of injuries.
Back. Yeah, has come back and been incredible in this Bucs team. I mean, this Bulls team has just been awesome on both sides of the ball, too. Opportunistic on the defensive side and just incredible on the offensive side. Alex Golish now in his third year leading the program. Just this past week, they beat North Texas, which that game came in with a little bit of,
concern.
Yes, some concerns. And
North Texas was favored.
Yeah, and they were both neck and neck until like a lightning strike. The Bulls scored 28 points to really create some distance. Byron Brown's been awesome, but the defense has also been, like I said, really opportunistic. And Jalen Shuler, he's one of those longtime Bulls that have been playing for the Bulls for a while now. He got an interception, a fumble recovery for a touchdown, and those are the types of plays that really flip a game on its head.
Right.
And at the college level can make a huge difference.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, as somebody who's spent a bit of time in Orlando, I know there had been that UCF Bulls rivalry. Didn't hear a lot of the Bulls kind of back in the day, but it sounds like they've turned things around a little bit there. I wanted to ask about the stadium, though. What's the latest on that, Mark?
The timetable is still in time for the 2027 season opener. If you're ever on the Tampa campus and you listen very closely, you can still hear the pilings being driven. And there's a level of excitement. You look at the recent hiring of Rob Higgins as the new CEO of athletics, and it's honestly. You even factor in a new president with Moaz Lamayim possibly coming to campus. There is a level of excitement with the program and with the university that hasn't been there for a while. The other thing, and Sky and I were talking about the idea of right now the Bulls are projected, and if you would have told me this at the beginning of the season, it was a possibility, projected to be in the college football playoff as the 12th team, as the representative of one of the lower conferences. That's amazing. That's going to feed into recruiting success. A new stadium could lead to recruiting success. That kind of success could lead you into one of these larger conferences for the Bulls.
And Rob Higgins, in his opening presser, kind of alluded to not being totally happy with being in one of these lower conferences. You could see, I mean, there's a lot of Florida schools now. You look at Florida, FSU, now UCF have those jumps in the conference standings. If USF could do the same thing, you look a decade down the line, they could be at the same playing field as some of those larger schools.
In the last few seconds here, can we talk hockey real quick? Tampa Bay Lightning season underway. They're 1-2. They've got new ownership. What are you hearing about the team? What are you seeing there?
Well, it started a little slow. First 2 games were losses, close losses, but they won last night over Boston 4-3. Again, I don't think there is the... obviously, among hockey fans, there's a level of excitement. I don't think this team has the projections that it's had in the past few years of being a Stanley Cup favorite. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, it's their neighbors and their rivals, Florida Panthers, who are 2-time defending champions and are most likely one of the favorites to win it all again this year.
Yeah. Going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much, very much. We've been speaking with WSF's Mark Schreiner and Sky LeBron. Sky, of course, the host of the Bay Blend. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Well, tomorrow on Florida Matters, live and local, Manatee County is naming part of a road after slain conservative activist Charlie Kirk. How do you feel about it? You can call and let us know, 813-755-6562. Leave a message. Email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org, and of course, tune in tomorrow at 12 noon. That's our show for today. Florida Matters executive producer is Grayson Doctor. Our producer is Amelie Horace. Our intern is Lily Belcher. Our engineers are Jackson Harp and Gio Garvin. Jackson composed our theme song. And Chandler Balcom is handling the video today. Subscribe to Florida Matters wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch on WSF's YouTube channel. I'm Matthew Petty. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
Tuesday marks 2 years since the attack by Hamas in Israel that ignited the war in Gaza. We speak with an Israeli-American rabbi about how that has changed her